I knew something was off the second I walked into the restaurant, before a single word was spoken. The lighting was too golden, too warm, the kind that makes everything look more flattering than it really is. The kind my mother would choose deliberately, because she believed mood lighting solved family problems the way bandages cured bullet wounds. I was 20 minutes early for my own birthday dinner, but of course they were already there. My parents never arrived late to anything that involved public visibility. They were seated at a long table near the floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the Seattle skyline like it was a kingdom they owned. My sister Harper sat between them, fingers dancing dramatically above her phone screen as she filmed some trendy transition video for her followers. Her laughter bounced across the room, bright and airy, like the sound itself had been taught to sparkle. I stood there for 3 seconds before Harper noticed me, and even then, she didn't look up. She just squealed, waving her camera vaguely in my direction. The birthday girl is here. Like I was a side character in the movie of her life. My mother looked up, all delighted surprise. Maya, sweetheart. Her voice was warm, but her eyes scanned me the way airport security scans luggage. Quick, efficient, searching for something wrong. My father lifted a wine glass as if to toast an invisible audience. There she is, 32 and thriving. The words sounded affectionate, but there was something dismissive underneath them, an undercurrent I'd grown up drowning in. I sat down, smoothing the fabric of the navy dress I'd chosen so carefully. I wanted tonight to feel like a step forward, a milestone, a moment where maybe, just maybe, everything would shift. I didn't even get to finish placing my napkin on my lap before Harper announced her news. Her voice rose above the soft restaurant soundtrack like a glitter cannon exploding. Guys, guess what? The brand deal went through. My mother gasped dramatically, clutching Harper's hands like she'd just announced she'd cured some lifelong disease. My father beamed with the kind of pride I'd never once seen aimed in my direction. They launched into a flood of questions. How big is the campaign? Did they approve your concept? Will they repost you? Like I wasn't sitting right there. I smiled politely, swallowing down the disappointment like I always had. Then the server arrived with 2 gifts. One beautifully wrapped, matte black with a gold ribbon. The other, a plain plastic bag from a pharmacy. I didn't need to be psychic to know which one belonged to who. Harper tore into hers, gasping theatrically as she pulled out a $5,000 DSLR with custom lenses. The table erupted in applause, my parents included, like they'd just witnessed a birth announcement. My father turned to me, almost as an afterthought. We got you something too. He pushed the plastic bag toward me. My hands felt oddly detached from my body as I pulled out a cheap spiral notebook, the kind sold next to coloring books for toddlers. A unicorn printed on the front, a price tag still stuck on the back. My mother tapped the cover. We thought something cute would brighten your day. Cute, for a 32-year-old woman. I opened it, expecting blank pages. Instead, I found a handwritten list. The title was underlined twice, in red ink like a teacher correcting a failing assignment. Ways Maya could improve her life. My stomach hollowed out. My heartbeat roared in my ears. There were bullet points, so many bullet points. Be more social. Dress more feminine. Don't be so sensitive. Stop avoiding family events. Learn how to enjoy life. Consider losing 10 pounds. Aim for a job with visibility. Be more like Harper. I couldn't breathe. My mother leaned in, voice syrupy sweet. We wrote it together. It's constructive. Families help each other grow. Harper added, smirking without actually smirking, if you fixed a few of these, maybe companies would want to hire you for something fun too. Fun, like my decade-long career in UX research, designing systems used by thousands meant nothing. Something inside me cracked. Not a loud break, more like a quiet, irreversible snap of a thread that had been stretched too tight for too long. But I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't even blink. I just closed the notebook gently, placed it on the table, and stood up. Where are you going? My father asked, annoyed, not concerned. Bathroom. I forced the word out, even though every inch of my body was screaming to run. I walked calmly through the restaurant, my heels tapping across the polished floor, my breath shallow and controlled. I passed couples laughing, bartenders shaking cocktails, waiters gliding between tables. When I reached the restroom door, I pushed it open with hands that didn't feel like mine. Inside, I locked myself in a stall, leaned against the cold metal wall, and exhaled everything I'd been holding for 32 years. It wasn't a breakdown. It wasn't even sadness. It was the realization that my family never saw me. Not once, not ever. The fluorescent bathroom lighting flickered, humming like a faulty memory. I pressed my palms to my face and whispered something that terrified me because of how true it felt. I don't belong with them. A sentence that didn't feel like betrayal. A sentence that, for the first time in my life, felt like freedom. That was the night my history split into two parts, before the list, and after. And I had no idea yet that the after would take me farther than I'd ever imagined. Farther away from them. Farther toward myself. Far enough to finally see what had been hidden all along. The night didn't end when I left the bathroom. It stretched, thin and sharp, like the wire of a trap waiting to snap. I stayed in that restaurant stall for 13 minutes, long enough to practice breathing, long enough to rehearse my expression, long enough to thread myself back into the version of Maya they expected. But something shifted inside me, and even as I stepped back to the table, I knew I would never unshift it. They didn't notice my swollen eyes or the stiffness in my movements. They were too busy taking photos of Harper holding her new camera, the skyline reflected in the restaurant windows like a curated backdrop. I sat down silently. Not one of them asked if I was okay. By the time dessert arrived, a chocolate lava cake with a candle shoved in crookedly, an afterthought dessert for an afterthought daughter, I couldn't taste anything. My tongue felt numb, my thoughts moving like heavy stones. After dinner, we hugged goodbye. Quick, stiff, obligatory. "Happy birthday, kiddo," my father said, already turning away. Harper barely looked up from her phone as she added, "Don't forget to tag me in the photos." Tag her. In photos of my own birthday. The drive home blurred into streaks of headlights and raindrops, the notebook sitting on the passenger seat like a threat. My apartment felt cold, unfamiliar, as if it belonged to someone else. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my bag, and sat on the edge of my bed. I opened the notebook again. Be more fun, be easier, be less intense. Don't be boring, don't embarrass us. I closed it slowly, my fingers trembling not from sadness but from realization. This wasn't new. This wasn't shocking. This was the same message they'd been sending me since childhood, just finally written on paper. A summary of a lifetime. At 2:41 a.m., I snapped. Not emotionally, logistically. I got up and began packing, not panicked shoving, not frantic movements, methodical packing, my laptop, 3 changes of clothes, my sketchbooks, 2 photo albums, the necklace my grandmother gave me before she died, the only person who'd ever made me feel visible. Everything else stayed. I pulled out my phone, opened my contacts, and stared at one name I hadn't touched in years. Lee, my childhood friend, my once best friend. The girl who used to braid my hair during sleepovers and whisper that my family didn't deserve me. We hadn't spoken much since college. Life got in the way it often does when you're trying to survive your own family. I typed the message 3 times before sending it. "Are you awake?" Her reply came 20 seconds later. "I'm always awake." What's wrong? A tear slipped down my cheek before I even realized it was forming. "Can I come stay with you?" Another 20 seconds, of course. Drive safe. Front doors unlocked. I'll leave the porch light on. I didn't hesitate. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a text. I grabbed my keys, locked my apartment behind me, and walked into the cold, damp Seattle night. My Toyota sat beneath the street lamp, the hood glistening with dew. When I slid into the driver's seat, the familiar smell of worn leather filled my lungs like oxygen. I put the notebook in the glove compartment, not to keep it close, but because I didn't trust myself not to throw it out the window while driving. The streets were empty as I pulled onto the highway. The city lights thinned behind me, replaced by dark stretches of road winding through forests and towns. My phone buzzed over and over, calls from my mother, texts from my father, even Instagram DMs from Harper asking if I could comment on her newest post to boost engagement. I turned my phone face down, then eventually turned it off. With every mile, I felt something uncoil from deep inside my ribcage, a tension I didn't know I'd been carrying for decades. Somewhere past Tacoma, the rain thickened. the wipers slashing across the windshield with a steady, rhythmic sound. The world was a blur of headlights and reflections, the road stretching into a dark unknown. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the unknown. I was afraid of the familiar. The familiar was what had been killing me slowly, piece by piece, under the guise of family. By the time I crossed into Oregon, the sky had lightened slightly, early dawn bleeding into the edges of the horizon. My hands were numb on the steering wheel, my throat tight with exhaustion. At 5:58 a.m., I pulled into Crescent Bay. Lee's porch light glowed exactly the way she promised it would. Her small cottage stood quiet and warm against the misty morning air. As I stepped out of the car, my knees almost buckled, the cold hitting me like a force. Lee opened the door before I even reached it. Her dark hair was messy, her eyes tired but bright. Maya, oh my God, she didn't ask questions. She didn't scold me. She didn't demand explanations. She just wrapped her arms around me. I felt my entire body sag with relief. Like I had been holding up a collapsing roof for years, and someone finally said, "Let go. It won't crush you. Not anymore." Inside her house, everything smelled like cinnamon and vanilla, warmth and safety. She led me to her couch, grabbed a blanket, and handed me a mug of tea like she'd been preparing for this moment all night. "Tell me what happened," she said. And for the first time, I did. Not filtered, not softened, not edited to protect anyone. I told her everything. And instead of disbelief, instead of minimizing, instead of telling me I was overreacting the way my family always had, she said something that made my chest crack open. "You didn't leave a family. You left a cage." The tea burned my throat, but not as much as the truth did. I didn't sleep for another hour, but when I finally collapsed into the guest bed, it wasn't from fear. It was from the weight of survival finally sliding off my shoulders. And when I woke up, the world felt different, not gentler, not kinder, just mine. For the first time. The next 3 weeks in Crescent Bay felt unreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. The quiet mornings, the soft hum of Lee's kettle, the distant crash of waves against the rocks, the absence of my mother's buzzing messages, my father's clipped voicemails, Harper's endless demands. Lee worked early mornings at the bakery she owned, so I often woke to the smell of bread cooling on the counter and a handwritten note telling me to help myself. Her home was small, mismatched, decorated with thrift store furniture and framed vintage posters. Nothing matched, and somehow everything did. It was the opposite of my parents' house, where every object was placed intentionally, not for comfort but for presentation. Here, nothing was perfect, but everything was warm. I spent the first few days in a fog, alternating between sleeping, crying, and staring at my phone only to force myself not to turn it on. Eventually, I cracked. I powered it up. 64 missed calls, 43 texts, 17 voice messages, 2 emails from my father, both demanding explanations, 1 text from Harper with a crying emoji and the message, "You're ruining everything again." Again, I powered the phone off and shoved it under a pillow. The 4th day, Lee dragged me, gently but firmly, to a therapy appointment she'd scheduled without telling me. "Meet her once. If you hate her, you never have to go back," she said. That's how I met Dr. Evelyn Hart. Her office was a small converted sunroom, filled with plants and soft lighting. Nothing about her felt clinical or distant. She had silver streaks in her hair and wore a knitted cardigan that looked like it had lived 1,000 lives. I didn't speak for the first 10 minutes. She didn't push. Then she said, "You look like someone who's been told her whole life that expressing pain is selfish." I broke. Tears came out in gasps, my chest tightening so hard I thought I might actually collapse. She waited until I could breathe again. "Tell me what finally made you walk away," she said. I pulled out the notebook, the list. She read the first page, then closed it slowly. "This is not love," she said quietly. "This is control dressed as concern." Something inside me unraveled. Our sessions became the anchor of my new routine. She helped me peel away childhood memories I'd plastered over with logic and excuses. The time I came home with a perfect report card, and my father asked why I didn't take more AP classes. The time Harper broke my favorite mug, and my mother lectured me for leaving it out. The time I got into my dream college, but Harper cried because she didn't want me to move away, and they asked me to defer a year so she wouldn't feel abandoned. Everything I labeled as normal. Everything I normalized as love. Therapy was like walking barefoot over shattered glass, painful and necessary. Every step forward hurt, but every session ended with one truth becoming clearer. I had never been loved. I had been managed. One afternoon, after therapy, I wandered into the Marine Center where Lee said her friend worked. That's where I met Theo. He stood near a large tank, feeding a rescued seal pup. He had sunburned cheeks, messy brown hair, and eyes that looked like they saw everything without judgment. "You're Maya, right? Lee's friend who's temporarily human soup," he said with a half smile. I actually laughed, like a real laugh, the kind that felt unfamiliar in my throat. We talked for 10 minutes that stretched into 20, then an hour. He was quiet in an intentional way, the kind of person who listened without planning his reply. He explained the rehabilitation program, pointing out small details with a tenderness I hadn't known men possessed. When I mentioned I'd left Seattle suddenly, he didn't pry. He just said, "Sometimes leaving is the bravest way to stay alive." That night, I lay in bed replaying that sentence. Life in Crescent Bay wasn't perfect. I still woke up with a knot in my stomach some days. I still had nightmares. I still reached for my phone before remembering why I'd left. But slowly, pieces of myself began returning. By week 3, my company emailed asking about my status. I sent a formal request to transfer to the Portland office. It would be closer to Crescent Bay, closer to Lee, closer to the version of myself I wanted to grow into. When the approval came, Lee threw a mini celebration, cheap champagne and grocery store mini cupcakes. "To new beginnings," she said. "To finally belonging somewhere," I whispered. The illusion shattered on a Tuesday morning when my phone began buzzing again. Over and over, vibrating violently against the nightstand. I turned it on despite my trembling hands. My father had messaged, "Your behavior is unacceptable. We need to talk. Now, my mother, we're worried sick. Your silence is cruel. Harper, Mom is crying nonstop. Dad is furious. Fix this, Maya, fix this." Not one message asked if I was okay. Not one message apologized. Not one message said, "We love you." They demanded. They blamed. They insisted. I stared at the phone until the screen dimmed. Then I blocked all 3 of them. My fingers shook as I pressed confirm. The silence afterward wasn't peaceful. It was roaring, deafening. That evening, I told Dr. Hart what I had done. She nodded gently. "Sometimes the healthiest boundary is distance. Your nervous system needs space to heal." I didn't know then that this boundary would trigger a storm I couldn't anticipate. A storm that would force every hidden truth, every denial, every buried wound to surface. A storm that would lead me straight back to them, not as the daughter they controlled, but as the woman they never thought I could become. I didn't plan to attend Harper's wedding. Even when the ivory envelope arrived with its embossed lettering and calligraphy, I left it unopened for 2 days. When I finally slid my thumb beneath the seal, the invitation was as grand as expected, gold foiling, a photograph of Harper and her fiancé looking like a magazine couple, and the message: "We can't wait to celebrate with our closest family." No +1, no personal note, just a reminder that my presence was an obligation, not a desire. Dr. Hart asked, "What will attending give you?" Closure, maybe, or clarity. The real answer: I didn't want to keep living in fear of them. I booked my own hotel room, my own rental car, my own schedule. 3 days before the wedding, I arrived in Portland. The city lights felt harsher than Crescent Bay, less forgiving. I checked into the Hilton, dropped my bags, and stared at the dress hanging on the closet door. Emerald silk. Structured, sharp lines, powerful. Not because I wanted to impress them, but because I wanted to remind myself who I'd become. The rehearsal dinner was held in a restored estate with marble floors and chandeliers that sparkled like polished tears. As I entered, conversations faltered. Eyes shifted toward me, scanning my posture, my outfit, my expression. My mother's face crumpled first. She rushed toward me, reaching for my hands. "You're here. Thank God." We thought. I stepped back. "I'm attending the wedding. Let's keep things simple." My father appeared behind her, jaw clenched. "We need to talk. Privately." I didn't move. "I'm here for the rehearsal. Anything else will have to wait." But they weren't used to waiting. Before I could react, my father motioned to an uncle standing nearby. They practically blocked the room's exit like they were corralling me. My mother's voice softened into its weaponized sweetness. Just a few minutes, Maya, for family. Dr. Hart's voice echoed in my memory. If they pressure you, pause. Ask yourself, am I choosing this or am I surviving? I exhaled. I'll give you 10 minutes. They escorted me into a library filled with leather-bound books and portraits of dead men who probably had the same expression my father wore now. Harper stood in the corner, her gown pristine, her makeup flawless, but her eyes darted nervously. My father started. This behavior is unacceptable. You left. You shut us out. You blocked us. We deserve an explanation. I scanned their faces, anger, guilt, panic. None of it looked like love. I don't owe you an explanation. My mother pressed a hand to her chest dramatically. I'm sick, Maya. I haven't slept. My blood pressure, that's manipulation, I said quietly. Harper flinched. Mom's not manipulative. She's worried. I turned to her. Worried people ask if you're safe. They don't threaten, they don't blame, they don't demand. Harper's eyes welled with tears, but she stayed silent. My father stepped closer, his voice dropping. You are destroying this family. My voice didn't shake when I answered. I didn't destroy anything. You just don't like that I stopped playing my part. He blinked, stunned that I'd spoken to him like that. I reached into my purse and pulled out the notebook, the list. I placed it on the desk between us. This is why I left. My mother whispered, that was meant to help you. No, I said. It was meant to reshape me into someone easier for you to control. Harper's expression cracked. Maya, I didn't know it hurt you like that. I opened the notebook to a random page. Stop being so sensitive. Stop embarrassing the family, be less intense. I looked at her. You wrote these too. She swallowed hard, her mascara trembling. My father motioned toward the door. Enough. Sit, all of you, we're fixing this now. Before the ceremony. I sat down only because standing felt like giving them too much power. I crossed my legs, folded my hands, and waited. My father began again. We need you to take responsibility. Apologize to your mother. Apologize to Harper. Then we can move on. I let the silence stretch long enough to make him uncomfortable. Then I said something I never planned to say. No, my mother gasped. No, I'm not apologizing for protecting myself. I'm not apologizing for leaving. I'm not apologizing for refusing to be your emotional punching bag. My father's voice rose. You will apologize or you're no longer part of this family. I smiled, small and deliberate. Okay. The room froze. Okay? Harper repeated. Okay, I said. If those are the conditions, then okay. My mother began sobbing. My father stared at me like I'd become someone unrecognizable. Maybe I had. I stood, smoothing the emerald silk over my hips. I won't fight you anymore. I won't beg for fairness. I won't shrink myself to keep the peace. I walked to the door. From behind me, I heard Harper whisper, cracked, barely audible. She doesn't need us anymore. I didn't turn around. Outside the library, music drifted from the reception area. Guests laughed. Life continued. I inhaled deeply, exhaled slowly, and stepped back into the world I'd chosen, the world where I wasn't the problem to fix, the disappointment to manage, the shadow to dim. The world where I finally understood. I didn't lose a family that night. I freed myself from one. The morning after the rehearsal dinner felt strangely quiet, like the world had paused without asking permission. I woke up in my hotel room with sunlight cutting across the white sheets, creating sharp geometric lines that reminded me of the models I built at work. Clean, structured, controlled, everything I had never been allowed to be. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of last night settle across my chest. The confrontation didn't replay like a trauma. It replayed like truth finally spoken aloud. My mother's collapsed face, my father's stunned silence, Harper's whisper. It all echoed in a part of me that had been silent for years. A knock interrupted my thoughts. Room service, a voice announced through the door. But I hadn't ordered anything. When I cracked the door open, a tray sat there with a covered plate, coffee, and a folded note with my name written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside, the message was short. You don't owe them anything. V. Vanessa, the bride, my cousin. The one person in our extended family who never took sides but always seemed to watch everything closely, like life was a puzzle she refused to solve too early. I lifted the cover from the plate. simple pancakes, strawberries, and a note from the kitchen saying it was already paid. The gesture softened something inside me. Around 11, I dressed and made my way to the botanical gardens where the wedding photos were being taken. The air smelled faintly of eucalyptus and wet grass. I kept to the edges, content to observe the orchestrated chaos. People noticed me but didn't approach, not out of avoidance, but because my expression made it clear I wasn't interested in apologizing or explaining. I didn't have to say the words aloud, my posture said them for me. Harper approached during a lull, holding her bouquet loosely. Her cheeks were flushed, not from makeup but emotion. "Can we talk?" she whispered. I nodded, though I didn't know what she expected. We stepped away from the crowd, behind a gazebo covered in vines. Her hands trembled as she spoke. "I didn't know you were hurting that much." She paused, forcing a breath. "I grew up thinking your silence meant you were fine. Silence meant survival, not fine." She continued, "Dad always made it seem like you were the strong one, like you didn't need anything, like it was okay to give you less because you could handle more." That stung more than the list ever had. I let her speak. I didn't rescue her from the discomfort. I didn't soften the edges of her truth. I just listened. "I'm sorry," she whispered finally. "I don't want to lose you." I hesitated. Old habits wanted to step in and comfort her. Therapy reminded me to choose myself first. "You may not lose me," I said slowly, "but you don't get to own me anymore." She nodded, eyes filling with tears she didn't let fall. When we returned to the group, the photographer motioned for us to join a family photo. My mother lifted her hand slightly, as if reaching toward me. I stopped 3 feet short of her. The space between us felt like a truth neither of us would ever unsee. The photos continued without me. And for the first time in my life, not being included didn't feel like punishment. It felt like choice. The wedding ceremony took place beneath a massive arched trellis wrapped in wisteria. Purple blooms hung like clusters of whispered secrets overhead. Guests settled into rows, the murmur of conversation rising and falling like ocean tides. I took my seat near the middle, alone by choice. My emerald dress shimmered under the late afternoon sun, catching the eyes of strangers who didn't know the story behind my isolation. The music began. Harper walked down the aisle looking radiant. Not radiant like an influencer selling perfection, but radiant like someone shedding a layer of delusion. Her eyes found mine briefly, and there was something new there. Not guilt. Not entitlement, just understanding. The vows were heartfelt. The groom's voice cracked halfway through. Harper laughed through her tears. Even I felt something warm curl in my chest. Love like that didn't need an audience. It wasn't performative. It wasn't conditional. It didn't resemble anything I'd grown up around. After the ceremony, while guests drifted toward the reception hall, I slipped away to the garden's stone path lined with lanterns. The quiet soothed me. The air hummed with distant chatter, but the garden felt untouched by human noise. Footsteps behind me broke the calm. My father. He didn't speak right away. He stood beside me, hands tucked behind his back, a posture he used with medical interns. He looked older than I remembered, less sharp, more tired. "Your grandmother used to walk here," he said. "She loved wisteria." I didn't respond. "I always thought you were like her. Independent. Strong, not needing anyone." I turned to him slowly. That wasn't strength. That was me being denied basic care and having to pretend it didn't hurt. His jaw tightened. "Your sister, she needed more." I nodded. "She did, and you gave it to her. And when I needed anything, you told me I didn't." He inhaled sharply, like the air itself betrayed him. "I didn't know you felt that abandoned." A strange laugh broke out of me, bitter and small. "You didn't know because you never asked." He flinched. "You're right." The admission shocked me enough that I looked at him fully for the first time in years. His shoulders were slumped. His eyes were red around the edges. "We failed you. I failed you." The words floated between us, fragile and heavy. I didn't want to hate them. I didn't even want revenge. I wanted honesty. I wanted effort. I wanted the one thing they'd never given me, recognition. But words weren't enough. "What are you going to do about it?" I asked. He swallowed. "I'll go to therapy, with you or without you. I'm not the man I thought I was." I believed him, not fully but enough to consider the possibility. Before I could answer, my mother approached, her heels clicking lightly on the stone path. She looked smaller than earlier, her makeup softened by heat and emotion. She stood in front of me, eyes glossy. When she spoke, her voice was no longer polished or rehearsed. "I don't know how to talk to you without hurting you." I stayed silent, but I want to learn. The admission cracked something in me, but not the way they expected. It didn't make me rush into their arms. It didn't erase decades of imbalance. It simply softened the hard edges around my heart. Then she held out an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "A letter. Honest. No excuses, no manipulation. Read it when you're ready." I didn't take it immediately. I stared at the thin white rectangle like it was a fragile truth that might crumble if handled wrong. I accepted it only when I felt my hand move on its own. We stepped back from each other. No dramatic embrace. No loud declarations. Just a quiet acknowledgement that something old had broken and something new had begun. After they left, I remained in the garden until the lanterns flickered on. Their warm glow cast soft shadows across the path. I felt the strange sensation of peace slip into my chest, not because anything was fixed, but because something painful had finally been named. Naming was the first step toward healing, and I was done healing alone. 6 months passed after the wedding, seasons shifting like chapters closing and opening with their own weather systems. Portland became home faster than I expected. My new apartment overlooked a river that glittered under city lights at night. My office was full of people who judged my work, not my worth. I made friends. I joined a ceramics studio. I went on long walks without checking my phone every 5 minutes to brace for a message that might ruin my day. And Theo became more than a friend. He was patient, the kind of patient that wasn't performative. He didn't rush me. He didn't push. He showed up when he said he would. He stayed when I needed silence. He talked when the world felt too loud. His presence wasn't a demand, it was a choice he made every day. One evening, as we sat painting pottery bowls at the studio, he glanced at my phone. "You never check your notifications." "I do," I said, "just not the ones that used to own me." He smiled. "Good." Around the 4th month, Harper began texting occasionally. Updates about her job, photos of her new apartment, questions about how to make her resume look more professional. Her messages were small and steady, like she was learning how to build a bridge plank by plank instead of demanding I traverse it immediately. I replied sometimes, not always, but I replied when I wanted to, not when guilt told me to. My parents kept their distance. I knew they were in therapy because my mother wrote a short message confirming it, not asking me to fix anything, not asking me to come home, just informing me. It was strange how relief and sadness could coexist so naturally. The biggest shift came one quiet Sunday morning. I was making tea when the doorbell rang. Theo opened it while I wiped my hands. Vanessa stood there, the bride, my cousin, the one who sent pancakes. She held a cardboard box. "I was sorting through some things and found this," she said. "Thought you might want it." She placed the box on my table and left quickly, like staying any longer would disturb something delicate. Inside the box was an old binder covered in childish stickers, the kind that flake at the edges. My handwriting covered the front label, Maya's Ideas. I sat slowly. I hadn't seen the binder in 20 years. I flipped the first page. Drawings, stories, architecture sketches from when I was 8. Notes I'd written about wanting to design treehouses, amusement parks, bridges. I remembered showing it to my mother once. She said, "That's cute, sweetheart, but don't get distracted from real goals." Then she put it in a box and never mentioned it again. I didn't know she'd kept it. There was a note taped to the last page, my mother's handwriting. "Found this in storage. Didn't know you'd want it, but you should have had it all along." I didn't cry, not yet. I closed the binder gently and held it against my chest. That was the first time I accepted the truth that healing didn't always arrive with an apology. Sometimes it arrived with a box from the past. Later that evening, Theo asked if I was okay. "I think so," I said. "I think I'm starting over." He nodded. "Starting over isn't forgetting, Maya. It's choosing what comes with you." For once, I knew exactly what I would carry forward and what I would leave behind. The next Christmas didn't sneak up on me. It walked toward me with deliberate steps, each week bringing a new memory, a new hesitation, a new question. Would this year be different? Would the past crawl back? Would I still feel the edge of the notebook list cutting into my ribs? Christmas Eve found me in my Portland apartment, surrounded by friends from work, neighbors, and a few new faces from the ceramics studio. Laughter filled the air. The smell of cinnamon rolls lingered in the kitchen. A small artificial tree sparkled near the window. It wasn't grand or perfect, but it was mine. Halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed. "Harper, can we video call? Just a minute." I stepped onto the balcony where cold air filled my lungs. I answered. Harper appeared with messy hair and a kitchen apron. Behind her, I saw my parents' living room, different, smaller. The old chandelier was gone. The walls painted a warm beige instead of the icy white I grew up with. Mom appeared behind Harper, holding something wrapped in tissue paper. "Can we send you something?" she asked softly. I nodded. Harper opened the package on her end so I could see. It was the notebook, the list, but every page was crossed out, not scribbled, not angrily slashed, neatly crossed out with a single line. On the inside cover, my mother had written, "We were wrong about everything. You didn't need to change, we did." My father stepped into frame next. No theatrics, no speeches, just a quiet, fragile sentence. "We're trying, Maya, not for you, for ourselves. But we hope you'll let us earn a place in your life again." I didn't forgive them on the spot. That would have been too easy, too false. But I also didn't hang up. I just said, "Thank you for doing the work." Harper smiled through tears. "We don't expect you to come home, ever, but maybe someday we'll come to you." A wind gust rattled the balcony railing. I looked up at the sky, cold, distant, clouded. Then I looked into the screen, into faces that once controlled me, now trying, slowly, imperfectly, to rebuild themselves. I opened my mouth and the words surprised even me. Maybe someday. We ended the call without promises, without pressure, without guilt. When I walked back inside, Theo placed a hand on my back. "Everything okay?" I nodded. "I think I finally understand something." "What?" "Family isn't who you're born to. It's who grows with you." He smiled, warm and steady. Inside, the room erupted into laughter over a board game. Someone spilled wine. Someone else argued about rules. It was messy and loud and real, and I belonged. Later that night, after the guests left, I placed the binder and the notebook, both symbols of my past, on a shelf beside the pottery bowl I'd made on my first day in Crescent Bay. 3 fragments of my story: who I was, who I became, and who I chose to be. I stepped onto the balcony again, the city lights stretching across the sky like constellations. I wasn't the girl from the list anymore. I wasn't the daughter forced into silence. I wasn't the scapegoat, the shadow, the forgotten one. I was Maya Rowan. And the life I built, brick by brick, choice by choice, finally fit me. A year ago, I left in the middle of the night with nothing but pain. Now I had a home full of warmth, a future full of possibility, and a self full of truth. Sometimes the happiest ending isn't going back. It's realizing you never needed to.